All right, well, here it is. I think in one of my last videos I mentioned my Asphalt Snowmobile, and decided to make a new video here about that sled. I actually have a couple of them. Two that are basically set up, and a third one that's a bit of a project. Well, let's be honest, all three of them are projects. But quick intro on this one. This is a 1997 Yamaha 700 SX. I think it might be called VMAX SX. It's got the name here. I'm not sure if that was the official title, but that was kind of a carryover from the earlier models they had in the 90s. But anyway, this was pretty much been in the family since new. The story with this sled is it was purchased brand new by my brother, but it was, I think, a 2-year leftover. So it actually spent, I mean, would have come out, what, in 97 sled would have come out in like fall of 96. I guess he purchased it in like the fall of 98 and never been out of the crate. So put together brand new, 2 years old. But anyway, he rode it for, I don't know, 6-7 years on the snow. And then we basically traded snowmobiles. I had a Polaris 700 twin. This is a 700 triple, or was a 700 triple. We basically traded sleds. I knew that I wanted to build an asphalt sled, and this was really a better platform, I thought, than a two-cylinder two-stroke. But anyway, so it's been in the family since new. And it did spend its first portion of its life on snow. So I guess I'll start out with kind of what makes an asphalt sled, and then I'll dive into details of what's really going on with this one. So if you want to convert a snowmobile to asphalt racing, specifically this is asphalt drag racing, there's a few things, well, there's quite a few things you could do to make them run good, but there's only really 2 things you have to do. Number one is replace the snow skis with wheeled skis like these, and they run, the original ones almost ran like rollerblade wheels, but nowadays they have proprietary wheels. This is a ski they don't even make anymore. Black Magic. It was actually a kind of an offshoot of Articat, and 10-15 years ago or something they sold their own skis, and I bought a pair and been using on this sled, even though obviously not an Articat. But there's still quite a few different options out there for skis. And then the other thing is a track. You have to replace the paddle track with a smooth slick track. I think Camoplast, the brand, is the only one that really offers a track nowadays. Different sizes, width and length, but those are the only things you have to do to convert. But then other things, and we'll go through that, what this sled has, other things to make them go faster and more reliable. Obviously, if you have a carbureted sled, you have to adjust for temperature and things like that. Cooling becomes an issue and stuff like that. But anyway, that's really the only thing you have to do to convert a sled. But I'll run through this one on more specifically what I've done to this. So as I mentioned previously, this is a 1997 Yamaha SX 700, or at least it was originally. A little more of the old school style snowmobile. Has trailing arm suspension as opposed to the wishbone style that most new sleds have. A traditional big hood that opens, more of a sit-down style for the rear suspension, or more, I shouldn't say, more specifically for the seat and how you ride it, lower handlebars, and all that really isn't as conducive to modern snowmobile riding, but it kind of makes it better for drag racing. You want these things as low as possible. So anyway, the stuff that I did to this, I guess I should clarify. This was originally put together in, gosh, 2008, I think. I think it was the first time I took it to the track, and I think I raced it from like 2009 to 2014 for about 5 or so years, competitively, because actually, Bandimere Speedway had originally it was a snowmobile class just for these asphalt sleds. And at one point there, I mean, it was never huge, but there might have been 16 or so snowmobiles at one point, and then dwindled down to like 8 or so kind of at the end. And then they combined it with other kind of power sports stuff. I think it could have been motorcycles, but it was primarily these like oversized junior dragsters, junior comp, I think they called them. They ran motorcycle or snowmobile engines. So we had a mixture of those and snowmobiles, and they were hard to compete with because they were so consistent and they could cut really good lights. Where on a snowmobile, it's a little more inconsistent because you're basically just throttle and brake. There's no electronics per se. So anyway, ran this thing competitively for, like I said, 5 or so years. Never won a championship, but finished twice a couple times. Won a bunch of races. It was a lot of fun. But then unfortunately the class, that kind of transition, that new class kind of died off. And the only thing that was left would be to run against cars. So did it a little bit, but never used it as much. And that's kind of how the snowmobile has been sitting. It's kind of hard to tell with this light. It's probably a good thing. This thing's a little dirty because it's been sitting mostly unused since about 2018, about 5 years. So yeah, I think it's about time to get this thing back out and get it running again. So let's break down what specifically is in this thing. All right, if I zoom in on the sticker, I think it says 12-17. So 17 must be the last season, and obviously 2017 inspection. That was the last season I really competitively raced this thing. 1150 ET. I think I ran somewhere right around there with this setup. But anyway, the basics of this, it's still the same chassis, same basic suspension. The changes I made were primarily stiffening it and lowering it down, because for drag racing, you really don't want much of any movement with the chassis. You just want to hook and obviously move forward. So starting the back here, it still has the original, I don't know if you can kind of see it down there, but it still has the original skid frame, excuse me. Yamaha had a bit of a funky design, in the early 90s, I think this design kind of came out for the suspension. It was a little bit funky compared to the more traditional that most sleds had back then, where it's just 2 suspension arms. But the only real change with this is I eliminated the front shock, lowered it down as much as I could. You remove the high facts, and I think I added a couple wheels. So basically everything rolls on the wheels, and nothing obviously directly contacts the track and slide like it would on a regular suspension, or regular track, excuse me. So rear suspension, basically stock, just lowered as far as you can get it, and it barely moves. I think it's got, I mean, yeah, it's supposed to have a little bit of suspension travel, and it's barely got any. But it has the, still has the 15-inch wide track, so this is a 121 by 15, and it's an older style camoplast that was a little harder. But this thing isn't terribly powerful, so it's okay. It still hooks up pretty good, and it lasts a lot longer. I think I bought that used years ago. The track, I should say. But otherwise, okay, unfortunately somehow I lost a little bit of this video, so I'm reshooting it now. But anyway, just talked about the rear suspension. Let's just talk about the rest of the chassis for a moment. Obviously the seat is gone. This is a Wall Brothers racing seat that I replaced it with. Just allows you to sit lower in the chassis. It has a race tank here where the big stock tank would have been. The rest of this is still the stock kind of cladding. It just really isn't, it's just held in by the top. It really doesn't hold anything down here. I put an aluminum plate here just because this would be open into the engine normally, or well, the tank would take its place, but obviously since that's gone. It does have a different throttle that I just replaced. It's a simpler throttle. It's a little stiffer and a little more precise. It doesn't have that safety thing that the regular sleds have. Drag race bar, so it's nice and flat. Tether, you clip that onto yourself for safety. This is the actual on-off kill switch nowadays. Still has a choke. Don't need to use it unless it's bitter cold, but still actually has a choke. Otherwise, got rid of the original gauges. They were kind of small on the sled, and I had this older Polaris 5-inch gauge that surprisingly still worked. So put that in, been using that. You can see it spins up to, or maybe you can't see because it's getting dark here, but it spins up to 9,000 RPM. Come around the front, still stock hood, headlight, although it's not hooked up. Stock style windshield, but the lowest one you could get. Front suspension, sorry this is dark, originally filmed it was lighter. But stock, it's just lowered. So everything's adjusted with the shocks to get over the spring kind of longer, and in turn that drops it down. You probably can't see because it's dark now, but pretty low to the ground. So anyway, chassis wise, yeah, mostly stock, just adjustments made to get it low, and that's about it. So next thing we'll look at here is literally, yeah, what's under the hood. Okay, so on the inside of the sled, this is where there's a few more changes from the original. First thing to notice is the airbox is gone. You don't really need it. That would be kind of wrapped around the steering column here. It's still got the original triple carbs. They're almost too small for this application, but running elevation doesn't really matter too much. They're only a little 33 millimeter. This is no longer a 700, but it is an 800 cc two-stroke triple. It's got a Bender Racing big bore kit, so the cylinders are re-sleeved and have larger pistons to get it up to 800 cc's. It has Bender Racing triple exhaust, specifically for the 800 motor. I don't even know if Bender Racing's around anymore, but I don't think they are. But anyway, they were a big aftermarket company specifically for Yamaha stuff. And what else under here? Clutching is still stock Yamaha because it just works so well. It actually still has more of a trail setup as far as the clutching goes. Secondary has a Bender Racing helix and springs, and so is the primary. And there's just different ones I've tried to get the RPMs up. I think it engages almost 5,000 now. Shifts out to 91, 9,200 RPMs, kind of the peak power band. So there's nothing really exotic about the clutching here. I just kind of played around with what I have had, kind of primarily based on the old trail setup, to be honest, when it was on snow, and came up with a decent combination. I mostly did bracket racing, so I wasn't too worried about absolute peak or fastest number. I was a little more concerned with consistency. But yeah, it has EGT probes, one for each cylinder on the exhaust. They currently don't go anywhere, but I do have gauges. I could hook them up. It's got this little boost. I forget what these are called. There's an aftermarket, like a boost equalizer. It's not a boost, but it basically runs between each of the carburetors after the carb, between that and the engine, that kind of equalizes each cylinder. That was something that I had laying around, so I threw on there. It still runs the stock fuel pump. Just runs for this tiny little tank, goes through a filter, the stock pump, and then there's 3 lines that go, one to each carburetor. The oil line, I'm trying to think, what else do we have here? Oh, the oil injection's still there, but it's only set on idle, and I actually have this tiny little tank, I think it's for like airplanes or something, that I fill it up with oil, and it puts a small amount of oil, because most snowmobiles have oil injection, so you don't have to pre-mix or anything. And this one, the way it's set up, it would have just pour regular gas, put oil in the oil tank, and run. But just because it's more of a high-performance engine, I run pre-mix on this, and I just keep that little tank down here, and that will put a little bit of oil, because it basically assumes the way it's set up that the engine is always idling. So it probably runs, to be honest, it probably runs always a little too much oil, but that's fine. It's better to be safe. But yeah, so this setup here with the 800cc big bore engine, and kind of optimized with jetting and everything, and basically set it, oh, stock computer and nothing else fancy over there, so stock ignition timing and all that kind of stuff. Probably should point out as I walk around here, I did get rid of the, I don't know if I ever had it. Yeah, I think I did. The original exhaust, and now it just has stingers. So it goes from here, and there's just 3 individual pipes. So this thing is very loud. I will include in this video just a quick little clip that I had from, I don't know, a few years ago when I fired up actually in the snow, just to kind of hear the sound. But this thing won't run quite yet. The carbs will have to be cleaned, and I want to do it a once over before I fire it up. But yeah, so, oh, and one more thing here actually on this side. This is a quick disconnect coupler, excuse me, for coolant, and this thing just runs water. It currently still has, and once again, I don't think you can kind of see it. Yeah, you can see it here. It still has the original heat exchangers that run down the floorboards here. And this is designed when the sled was on snow. That's how these things were cooled. As you ride a snowmobile, the snow kicks up on the bottom of the sled and it hits those heat exchangers. The coolant runs through that and it cools it down. So that's the basic setup of a snowmobile on snow. For this, you actually have to run a cool down cart. So you fire the sled up, you make your run, you come back, it's really hot. You run a cool down cart where you just circulate water, cool it down, and then do another pass. So you, unless you're going to sit for hours, you have to do that every time you run. And I'll follow up on that in probably another video. I got to go dig that thing out as I start tinkering with this thing. But anyway, I'm blabbering here, so I'll try to cut this off. This is the basics of the sled. Like I said, 97, formerly a 700, now an 800. I have a few things I need to do. Number one, just clean it up. Number two, clean the car specifically. See if I can fire it up, get it running, make sure everything's okay. I think there was, I thought the last time I ran it, and part of the reason I parked it was, I think I let it freeze, unfortunately, a little bit overnight once. It was just sitting in the garage, but still got too cold. And I think it cracked one of the heat exchangers or something, so I might have to check that out. I'm planning on just getting rid of the heat exchangers because you don't need them. So I'm planning on taking these out. They're aluminum, but save a few pounds anyway. And then just basically running a very short water loop that basically runs, comes out the bottom of the engine. This is the coolant line, comes out the bottom of the engine, runs down back, maybe have it loop through here somewhere, and then just come right back in again. I don't know if I'll need any kind of heat exchanger at all. Kind of look into that. But anyway, so that's one thing I have to look at. And then last is when I converted this to the big block, or the big bore setup, I can't remember what the issue was, but for some reason, it's really hard to see because it's dark, but one of the coolant lines runs, you can see it down here, or maybe you can't see it, but it runs down underneath the clutch, but then it's really close right there. It's almost rubbing, so I need to check that out as well. But yeah, so sorry to just ramble on here, but yeah, there's a few things I need to do this sled. Shouldn't be too much. I'm going to take it down the track. I guess the last thing I should mention is what I used to run when it was a 700, which I ran for the first, that was most of my racing, was the 700. It ran basically 12 flat at about 105, I think, something like that. And then after the regular racing series kind of died off, and then I eventually put the big board, just messed around with it. I only ran it a couple times, and I think I don't know if I ever had it even remotely optimized, but I think it ran low 11s at like 115-ish, somewhere around there. So that's what I'll be shooting for with this setup. I don't know if I could ever get a 10 out of this thing. Maybe put some lightweight person on here that might help. But yeah, I think it'd be fun just to get it out, see if I can get back and, like I said, run some low 11s on this, and yeah, go from there. But I have another sled I'll follow up with another time. It's a Arctic Cat with a triple as well, 2-stroke, but it's a 1100. And that thing probably, I don't know if I forgot. I don't know if I mentioned, this is probably about 175 horsepower, this setup here. Bone stock was only 115 as a 700. And then it had only a single exhaust. And if you put triple exhaust on there, the 700 got up to like 140-ish, somewhere around there. But with the 800 and the porting and everything is done to this, it's about 175-ish, somewhere around there. Not at elevation, but anyway, at sea level. So, but this other sled, it's 1100 triple. That is 250-ish horsepower. And then the project, the long-term project, is a turbo 4-stroke that would be 330 horsepower. That should be probably in the 8s if that thing ever gets finished. So anyway, I'm gonna cut this thing off before I talk any further. Intro to the asphalt sleds. One of the next videos coming up, probably working on this thing and then taking it to the track and see what it does, see how fast it can go. So yeah, thanks for watching this one, and we'll see you in the next one.